Hi, I'm Walt Rubel, the editorial page editor for the Las Cruces Sun News, and with me today are Frank Leto, the publisher of the Sun News, and Sylvia Ulloa, the managing editor. Together we make up the editorial board, and we're going to be talking today with candidates in the District 1 race for Las Cruces City Council. We had hoped to have both Eli Guzman and Kasandra Gandara here with us today. Mr. Guzman was apparently unable to attend, and so we will be talking with Kasandra Gandara. We also note for the record that there will be a third person on the ballot in this race, Stephen D. Calderazzo. He informed the city on Tuesday that he was intending to withdraw, but because that came later than the ballots were printed, his name will still be on the ballot, and so there will be 3 people in the District 1 race when you go to cast your ballot on November 3rd. Very quickly, we note that District 1, which is the downtown part of Las Cruces, has been represented by Miguel Silva since 2007. Miguel is vacating that seat this year in order to run for mayor. And so with that, we welcome Kasandra Gandara. And I'd like to start, given the fact that you and Mr. Guzman are both new to the voters, to just ask you to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about what your experience has been and what led you to make the decision to run for city council this year.
Thank you so much for having me this afternoon. Again, my name is Kasandra Gandara. I have been living in this community for 23 years. I've raised my children, Brian and Elena, so of course I'm a single mom. I'm also a social worker. I've been a social worker for 25 plus years in state government. I currently am the regional manager for the Southwest quadrant of the state for a state government entity. I oversee a budget of $8.6 million. And the reason why I'm seeking office is I've had the opportunity to be involved in a minimum wage campaign, and I saw firsthand the operations of city council, and especially felt like because of my experience in public service that I felt I would be a good candidate to affect change in the greater Las Cruces, particularly District 1.
You say you were involved. I assume you mean the campaign that CAFE launched last summer in order to raise the minimum wage in Las Cruces. Were you involved in that, actually collecting signatures, or what was your involvement with that campaign?
Yes, I was involved in the executive committee with CAFE, also involved in obtaining signatures. Okay. And visiting with the city councilors and Robert Garza at many times throughout that experience. Yes.
So just to remind people who may be tuning in and don't remember all of what happened there, the city council essentially accepted the petitions, or the city clerk acknowledged that there were enough petitions. The council, according to the charter, or at least a lot of people's reading of the charter, then had 2 choices to make. They could have either put it to a vote to the people and let the residents of Las Cruces decide, or they could have accepted the CAFE proposal, which they did, but then they immediately changed that proposal. As you were witnessing all of that happening, what was your response to the reaction of the city council after the signatures had been turned in?
So our intention was always to follow the charter with advice given by Mr. Garza and others, and it was to conduct a ballot initiative, obtain the number of signatures, right, the certified signatures, and actually put it to a vote, allow the people to vote for that particular issue.
Okay, so if you had your way, you would have liked to have seen that gone to the ballot.
That was what we had intended to have happen, yes.
Okay, and having gone through that whole experience, does that change the way that you look at that whole initiative process? And do you think the charter should be changed so that maybe the city council doesn't have the flexibility to do in the future what happened in this case?
I believe the charter is what governs, of course, City Council. That might be something that the City Council would need to look at in terms of changing the charter so that those sorts of things do not happen. I believe strongly that democracy took a back seat when that occurred. I believe that our intent at that point in time, through the efforts of CAFE, was to put it through a ballot of initiative, and we had hoped that the people would speak. And at that point in time, yes.
Can you talk a little bit about the initiative itself and the minimum wage itself and the concerns that were raised in the business community that this would have a negative impact on jobs? What is your reaction to that, and what are your thoughts on why it was so important that the minimum wage did get increased in Las Cruces?
You know, I learned a tremendous amount participating in the campaign. From the get-go, we were very open to have open conversations with the business community, with the workers, really with all the city. And unfortunately, I believe a line was drawn in the sand, if you will. It became extremely adversarial between the business community, and my estimate, and the workers. And it was extremely unfortunate that that occurred. And what I thought happened was a lot of those discussions, those needed discussions that should have happened, didn't happen. And I think that was probably the most unfortunate thing.
Okay. Anything else, Sylvia?
Well, it seems to me that since your direct interaction with the city council kind of inspired you to run for office, so how might you change, or what kind of direction do you think that the council is going? What kind of direction would you like to see the council go in if you were able to get this seat?
Sure. My vision is, and let me back up just a little bit. I've spent the last 6 weeks knocking on doors, speaking to people in my district, and not only in my district, businesses alike. They have felt a lot of frustration with the city council, city representation, and I think they felt in a lot of ways disconnected and shut out from a lot of the happenings, if you will. So first and foremost, I feel that I'm very relational, and that's exactly what needs to happen, is building relationships. And I would do that. I would be responsive to our district, to the community, by having an open door policy and respectful. What you'll find with me is I'm very solution focused, I'm strengths based. I will listen to folks and really have an understanding of where they're, from their perspective, where they're coming from, and then try to make the best decision for all the people, just not a segment of the population, but for all people.
And so how do you think that that sort of fits in with the rest of the council? Because that'll be just your one vote, which is the way it should be. You're representing one particular district. But how do you think you might want to work with the other councilors to sort of push forward your agenda that represents your own particular district?
I think I would do the same thing, is build relationships with each of those city councilors, have what I call courageous conversations, dialogue about what the issues are, what the concerns are, and hope to come to a better understanding of what one another's issues are, and then come to a decision.
Mm-hmm. And do you particularly like the direction that the city council is going? Do you like the direction that Las Cruces is going to? And if you don't like that direction, what direction do you really want to see that going?
I think there's a lot of well-intentioned people in city council and the mayor. I think there's some wonderful things that are going on in our city, particularly with a lot of the different activities that entice people to come to Las Cruces, to visit Las Cruces, to live in Las Cruces. I think essentially I feel like in my district, again, there's a lot of people who are frustrated with their representation. And I intend to have an open door policy, be respectful and responsive, and a timely response, which I think is extremely important, and very relational.
District 1 is the downtown part of the city, and you've talked about knocking on doors within the district. I want to ask you a couple things specific to the district itself. One Is the new plaza that is going in part of an ongoing years-long effort to try to revitalize the downtown effort? That is being paid for by something called a tax increment development district that helps to keep the taxes that are generated downtown in the downtown area. Your thoughts on the plaza overall and the overall effort to try to revitalize downtown? And do you think that TID money is a good way to do that, and is it being used well, do you think?
First and foremost, our district encompasses is a very unique district. It not only encompasses downtown, it of course encompasses the country club area, Solano, the Mesquite district, which is very historical and filled with lots of culture, if you will. Many families are still residing there, not to mention the downtown area. Where your offices are located, correct? Mm-hmm. But also in the Alameda Depot district. And so I know that there's a lot of attention being focused on the revitalization of downtown, and there should be lots of different things that we should be doing to revitalize downtown. But a lot of the small businesses, the local businesses, what really essentially is the heart and soul of our city is saying, don't forget about the rest of us. All of that is important as well. And so I'm extremely, I think, grateful that and hopeful that the plaza will bring a lot of economic development to our city, especially in that area. I'm not all familiar with that tax credit, frankly, but it sounds like it's a great opportunity to keep the taxes and use the funding or the money for that particular project. So many times that I've talked to small businesses and business in general, there is concern of, okay, where is this money? And knowing what I know about bureaucracy, state bureaucracy and funding, if you will, a lot of that funding is used for particular projects and cannot be used for different things, and that's just the way the funding is put together. And so I think it's important that the city be transparent, and maybe transparency isn't the best word to use here, but we need to be more communicative with our folks about where that money is, how it's being used, and is it being used specifically for that area. Again, so many times I hear concern about where is that money going, and is it specifically going for what it's intended to go to.
As you're talking to the other small businesses that may not be in that main downtown area, what are you hearing from them in terms of what their needs are? What are they looking to get from the city government? Again,
I think that there's a lot of frustration, according to what they've spoken to me about, shut out, if you will, from a lot of the goings on and activity that the city is putting forth. Some of them feel like there is they're seeing growth in other parts of the city, as opposed to growth in our area, in our district. And so I think they're feeling a bit again left out. And I think I want to assist them, being that bridge, right, the voice for them as well.
Frank, on downtown, anything?
I just wanted to go back to the minimum wage. You talk to a lot of businesses. How do you respond to the businesses that say to you, because they certainly said to us that this is going to harm our business, it may put me out of business, maybe not the first year, but down the road. How do you balance the legitimate concerns of rising costs for business with the goals of trying to raise the overall minimum wage?
Again, I want to be responsive and respectful, and I've been clear all along. I don't own a small business, but I operate a large state entity with what may be to some not a huge amount, a huge budget, and so I have experiences making decisions that affect all of my staff, right? And essentially, there are some times when my upper management is saying, you're going to have to cut 30%. And so I have to be able to do that. So I'm no stranger to making difficult decisions in the midst of those sorts of budgetary constraints. But what I know that it's a concern. I feel like the people have spoken. I think it brings money to people who struggle, and money that can be used for recreational opportunities such as the movies and restaurants. And so I think it can be a good thing, and will be a good thing for our community. But also, I also think that we need to develop a stronger evaluation tool, a tool that will that would help shape and give us feedback about those types of issues, and always being mindful that I have to, as the city council that's representing all people, not just a segment, but also the business community, is to listen to what their needs and concerns are and be able to act on that appropriately.
The other complaint that we hear a lot from the business community involves the tax increase that was passed a couple of years ago. Just to frame that was done in response to legislation passed at the state level that reduced corporate taxes, but also took away what was called hold harmless payments that the city had been receiving since the food tax was eliminated about a decade ago. That was something that was going to be phased in. There was going to be a 3-year grace period, and then, I should say phased out actually. The payments to the city were going to then be phased out over 15 years. And so there was, according to state lawmakers, a lot of cushion there, a lot of time the city could have prepared for that, but instead what they did was they immediately took advantage of the ability to pass a tax increase. The state gave them 3 options. It could be 1/8, 2/8, or 3/8%, and they took the full 3/8%, and they did it as quickly as anybody in the state did it. Do you think that was prudent? Was that, as the city officials are saying, allowing them to put money away for when they know that this deficit is going to come, or did they, as business leaders, say jump the gun on that to the point where now they have more money than they know what to do with, according to some folks?
So of course I wasn't a part of that vote, but what I can say is that I applaud the city for being forward thinking, to be able to put the money in, say, bonds that will give some revenue down the road. What I hear from our community, from the constituents, is that they wish that the city would have waited some, and a time. Because I wasn't intricately involved, I hate to criticize something that I'm not involved in, but essentially, I think, again, our constituents feel that they're not being listened to and shut out of some of those dynamic decisions. And so, I know I said that I applauded the city for forward thinking, for being a visionary for years down the line, and I think that's essential, that we should think about that. And we also, I like that the city then put together a group of individuals that were going to look at what can we do to improve economic development, infrastructure, those types of things. And it sounds like, given what I've read and what I've researched, things like a soundstage for the film industry to come into our community, something that I think is very much needed, and something that we can partner with the university on. Street improvements, which is so big for my district. I've walked around and have seen our streets and the decay of a lot of our streets, and people are very clear that our district needs to be prioritized, probably in number 1 in terms of improving our streets. And so those sorts of things, I think, are things that have been interesting and important to me and should be a priority. Also, this idea of quality of life. And what does that mean? Recreational facilities, especially for our youth and our elderly, our aging population, something that I think our city certainly needs to think about and be visionary about, because we're looked at as a retirement city, and many individuals will come here and seek housing and seek activities, and I don't know that the city is prepared for some of those types of things to happen. Of course, as a social worker, those are things that are very concerning to me, and again, I've raised my children here, as you are aware. They're my son Brian, who's 26, and my daughter Elena, and I always look to the city for affordable programs, and that's what lots of people do, is look to the city to make those types of things available, especially for our youth. And I believe that it does increase the quality of life, particularly for that segment of the population, something that we should be investing a lot of our energy and resources in.
We're getting down to our last couple of minutes, and I wanted to touch on something real quickly and let Sylvia and Frank jump in as well. But you mentioned the country club is also part of the district, and,
Yes, sir.
and we've seen what has happened with that over the last several years. There, at one time, were hopes and dreams that could be converted into a premier park or a large green space.
Right.
It is now on track to be the Park Ridge Hospital complex. Your thoughts on how all of that played out, and are you happy with what the result is on that, or would you have liked to have seen something different?
That's a very complex, a great question, but very complex one. And I think there is much concern in that community and the surrounding community about what that's going to do to traffic in that area, what that hospital will bring in terms of, well, and they're talking it being more like a boutique hospital, which will not serve all the population. It eliminates the Medicaid and Medicare population. I'm deeply concerned about those sorts of things, and I think the public needs to be quite aware of what occurred, what will now happen, and again, I've talked to a lot of folks who are deeply concerned about their community and those decisions. And so one thing, again, like I mentioned, the impact that traffic will have in that community is great, and I've talked to several individuals that are very concerned about what it's going to do to their community where they live.
Right.
You mentioned quality of life, and it sounded to me like recreation was a big part of what you think is important for Las Cruces. Does that mean that you would support the plans that are underway right now to build a new or to expand the aquatic center? And what other kinds of things do you think beyond parks constitutes quality of life for Las Cruces? Like, what would you be pushing for?
I am a huge supporter of the building on or adding an additional Olympic-sized pool. I know that's something that many people would really love to have in our community. I think it'll bring a huge investment, if you will, to the city to have that sort of pool regionally, to have different competitions and whatnot. I did mention parks and recreations as something that is very important. Also, although I believe that the city has some amazing opportunities, like for example the Art Rumble that happens every first Friday. I've been to a couple of those events, and I'm a bit disappointed with the number of folks that participate or lack thereof. I think we need to do a better job of communicating out that these activities are occurring and bringing a lot of diversity to those activities, or as programming, if you will. I don't think we probably do the best job informing folks that this is available to our city. I thought, man, what an opportunity to bring kids that may not have that opportunity. ever is to be involved in the arts, and that would be a great opportunity, an opportunity to bring mentoring programs right to our city, utilizing our elderly population, our business population, and others. I think are essential, I believe.
Frank, anything that we haven't touched on?
Just one thing, and I realize you weren't on the council at the time, but it was kind of a controversial issue a little while ago about the new Walmart that was going to be built on Valley, and the current city council voted unanimously to block that change that did not allow them to open at that time. You've obviously studied a lot of the issues. How would you have voted on that?
Again, I mentioned that I believe our small and local businesses are the heart and soul of our city, and I would have voted against having the Walmart come to our community. We have 2, do we not? Or 3? And I believe that
So you would have voted no. That's fine.
I would have voted no.
Because we are short on time. So again, I know you weren't on the council. You said maybe we should have delayed the GRT, but they didn't. They brought it to a vote. How would you have voted on that?
You're asking me a tough question, but I believe that I would have voted for the GRT because I think what it brings to our community.
Good, thank you. Well, I know you got to wrap it up.
We do have to wrap this up, and once again, we want to thank Kasandra Gandara for speaking with us, and we had hoped to have Mr. Guzman, and certainly invite people to go to his website or find out what they can about him as any way possible. We will be speaking him for our story in the Las Cruces Sun News, and we will have the information there. And finally, we just want to remind people to get out and vote. The election is going to be on November 3rd. There are actually 3 city council races in District 1, District 2, District 5. You have to actually be a member of that district in order to vote for any of those races. But we have the mayor's race and the presiding judge race, or municipal judge, and everybody gets an opportunity to vote in those. So get out and vote, and thank you for watching.